Getting too much spam and want to be able to better protect your personal data? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, well, we did it. We finally made it through February, or at least some of us did. I don't know if I can count myself among that crowd since I've only just finished Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 after 105 hours of play, meaning I haven't even touched Monster Hunter Wilds yet. I recall a starry-eyed self at the beginning of February aiming to get a day one review out for Monster Hunter, but alas, Henry of Scalus had something to say about that. Anyway, the Kingdom Come review is being edited right now and will be up over the weekend. Spoiler alert, you might see the word very in the title. Outside of that, we're looking forward to a surprisingly big March. Split Fiction, Frag Punk, Xenoblade Chronicles X, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Atomfall, and plenty more. 2025 is starting off strong, but it's not all good news, and I guess that's the segue. A few weeks back, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg reported that Warner Bros. Games division was in deep doo-doo. That came as little surprise, of course. We'd all just seen how badly Suicide Squad went, resulting in a $200 million write-down for Warner Bros. Rocksteady has now officially moved on from that after initially planning for it to be $1 billion live service that would get years of updates. Boy, if I had a buck for every time I had to utter that sentence over the lifetime of this show, I'd have enough money to fund my own multi-million dollar live service flop. Anyway, that all happened last year, and 2025 was proving to be a little better for Warner Bros. With the announcement that their big IP play Multiverses was getting shut down just a few short months after its initial release. That news came around the same time that Warner Bros. Games boss David Haddad tendered his resignation after a decade in the job, signaling a change in the guard that Warner Bros. Underscored in an earnings call where they publicly committed themselves to massively overhauling their gaming business. Well, the biggest salvo in that reformation was launched yesterday with the news that Warner Bros. Was cancelling the long-in-development Wonder Woman game and closing 3 studios. Warner Bros. San Diego, who were largely a support studio, Player First Games, who made Multiverses, and Monolith Productions, who were working on that Wonder Woman game. So let's talk about these 3 studios. The one we know least about is San Diego. They were formed back in 2019 and haven't played a leading role on any title, but they have provided support to a number of Warner Bros. Projects, including Suicide Squad. We don't know how many staff worked at the studio, so it's unclear how many people its closure has affected. Next up is Player First Games. This is a studio that was also founded in 2019 and had about 75 staff. They worked exclusively on Multiverses, and Warner Bros. Was so happy with them that they fully acquired the studio in July of last year. Now fast forward like 6 months, and that team of people with all their institutional knowledge and experience and their chemistry and their shared values, all of that is thrown out the window because the people who bought them 6 months ago decided they no longer fit into their grand strategy, and so every one of those 75 people are now out on their ass. Such a destructive act from a company that is increasingly famous for its destructive acts. But the real kick in the teeth here is, of course, the closure of Monolith. Now, the kids these days, they might not even know who Monolith is because the last time they shipped a game was 2017, and it was the excellent Shadow of War, which was the sequel to the also excellent Shadow of Mordor. These games were basically like, what if you set Assassin's Creed in Middle-earth? And they were the games that delivered the Nemesis system, a system that created a really meaningful relationship between you and the various goons of Mordor that were hunting you down. It was a system so brilliant that Warner Bros. Patented it just to make sure no one else could use it, and since then, no other game has been able to use it. I continue to believe that patenting game mechanics is anti-art and the law enabling it is bad, and one day when I'm president, I'm going to fix it. In the meantime, all I can do is complain. Of course, those of you with longer memories might remember Monolith for their other breakout series, Fear, a series that to this day has some of the best enemy AI in the history of video games. Like, for real, almost no shooter since then has managed to top it. Before that though, they made No One Lives Forever, and that is an absolute fucking classic shooter, spoofing the Bond thing so flawlessly in a way that, again, no other game since then has managed to do. So do you see the trend here? This is a studio that was always pushing the envelope, achieving things that left a lasting legacy, and now that studio is no more, with an estimated 250 people out of the job. So, why did this happen? Well, the way Warner Bros. Tells it, it was all about prioritization. Quote, "We've had to make some very difficult decisions to structure our development studios and investments around building the best games possible with our key franchises, Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Game of Thrones," end quote. Yes, because that's what's going to make you the big bucks in 2025. Game of Thrones stuff, sure. They did speak specifically about the cancelled Wonder Woman game, saying, quote, "The development of Monolith's Wonder Woman video game will not move forward. Our hope is to give players and fans the highest quality experience possible for the iconic character, and unfortunately this is no longer possible within our strategic priorities," end quote. I mean, like, what do you even say to that? It's no longer possible for you to make a good video game based on your strategic priorities. Like, is that what you seriously just admitted to? Polygon obtained an internal memo from Warner Brothers head of games, streaming, and microwave programming, JB Perrottet. His language was extremely cringe-inducing for someone who just shuttered one of the most successful studios of all time. He says he wants Warner Brothers to, quote, regain our credibility and swagger at producing great games, end quote. Unfortunately, he went on, quote, getting our swagger back happens one high-quality game release at a time, and our financial credibility gets rebuilt one fiscal quarter at a time, delivering what we said we would deliver, and no big negative surprises, end quote. A big negative surprise like shuttering Monolith so you can focus on more Game of Thrones stuff, maybe? Like, is that one of the bad surprises you're talking about? More pointedly, he said that this refinement of strategy was all about getting Warner Brothers focused on fewer but bigger franchises, and there really is no more perfect example of executive brain rot and how anathema it is to the process of making great video games. To these people, everything is a franchise, an IP, a patent, a fiscal quarter bonus, a tax write-off. If you actually cared about making good video games, you wouldn't be betting the entire fucking house on a new Game of Thrones game. You'd be incubating numerous studios, fostering a mix of new and existing IP. You'd take your big wins on Harry Potter and you'd invest those in a number of smaller projects, some of which won't pay off, but some of which might be the next Power World or Lies of P or Valheim or whatever. And this is where I've got to tip my hat to EA, who does exactly this with their EA Originals program, and that led them to publish It Takes Two, which went on to sell 20 million copies and win Game of the Year at the Game Awards. So once again, we're back where we started, a new generation of inept Warner Brothers leadership making huge risky bets on established IP because executives view video games as IP delivery vehicles rather than an actual art form. But sure, it's gonna work this time, Perrottet. Absolutely. You just stay the course, man. You got this. All right, so what else went down last week? Well, last week we did speak about NetEase laying off a number of US-based staff who supported Marvel rivals, and we said this was very likely due to a more general pulling back from their non-Chinese markets. This week, GameFile published a story that discussed NetEase's thinking in more detail, and if their reporting is accurate, it seems as though that pullback is larger than first thought. According to GameFile, NetEase are actively shopping around a number of studios hoping to divest from them, and if those studios can't fill the funding gap, then they'll have to close. This led a number of NetEase-supported studios to issue a statement on the matter, attempting to reassure both their players and their investors that the lights will remain on come what may. Rebel Wolves was one such example. They're working on that Blood of the Dawnwalker game, and they reiterated that NetEase is just a minority shareholder and that they would be fine even if NetEase did pull up stumps. David Cage's Quantic Dream is wholly owned by NetEase, and they tried to allay concerns by saying that 2024 was actually their most profitable year in the studio's history, propped up by big back catalog sales, and honestly, someone's got to look into that claim because that does not make any sense at all. Regardless, NetEase pushed back on the reporting, saying their overseas plans have not changed, but that's not what Bloomberg is reporting. They say GameFile's reporting is accurate and that NetEase's CEO William Ding is taking a razor to multiple projects. Word is he even wanted to cancel Marvel Rivals prior to release so he wouldn't have to pay licensing costs to Disney. Bet he's glad he didn't go through with that big brain plan. We also received word ourselves from one source that confirms that NetEase is pulling back from various projects, many of which are not public due to the nature of the agreements or the size of the investment. But bottom line, NetEase are definitely looking to tighten the screws on their operation, so do expect plenty more shakeups to come. And finally, here's some good and bad news. On the bad news front, Microsoft have just announced that Fable has been delayed into 2026. Now obviously, you never want to rush a game, so we should never be too harsh on a delay announcement, but on the other hand, Fable is cool, and Playground Games is a cool developer, and it would have been nice to be able to play Fable this year rather than next. As a consolation prize, Playground were kind enough to give us a first look at actual gameplay of Fable, and here it is. There's no sound to any of it, so there's no harm in talking over it, but as you can see, it's a much more realistic take on the Fable aesthetic, which used to be way more stylized. Personally, I like it. I think the stylized look has found plenty of purchase in the AA space these days, which is great, but Playground have always been about absolute cutting-edge visual technology, and seeing them trying to deliver that in a fantasy setting with the Fable IP, I think it was the right approach for them, and I'm super into this. Plus, the ending of the trailer fills me with plenty of confidence that Playground know exactly what we fans are watching for. A quick lightning round to finish off. Konami were obviously very happy with the work that Bloober Team did on the Silent Hill 2 remake, so they're teaming up for another project. In announcing the partnership, neither party was saying what the project is, but they have confirmed it's based on an existing Konami IP. Frankly, I would be stunned if it wasn't another Silent Hill remake. Bloober Team have spent a huge amount of time creating art assets and refining their touch when it comes to this series, so I fully expect a 1 or 3 announcement sometime in the future, but you never know. Could be a new Dance Dance Revolution game. Bloober Team would be perfect for that, wouldn't they? Absolutely. Anyway, speaking of secret but sort of announced projects, Saber Interactive, the team behind the incredible Space Marine 2, have just announced that they're teaming up with Hasbro to work on something big. Here's what they had to say, quote, "Combining high-octane single-player action and amazing multiplayer with Saber's swarm tech, this new AAA title based on one of our tentpole IPs is sure to be a hit," end quote. Hasbro has a ton of IP under its banner, including Dungeons & Dragons, G.I. Joe, Magic the Gathering, Power Rangers, and Transformers, and oh my god, can you imagine how good a Saber-made Transformers game would be? I'm half transforming just thinking about it. Some rare good news in the world of games ratings. Balatro has kicked that PEGI 18 rating to the curb, securing for itself a 12+ rating, because of course Balatro should not be an adults-only game. Jesus, what the fuck, PEGI? The background to this was that PEGI rated it 18+ because they thought it was teaching people how to gamble, overlooking the many loot box and gacha games with much lower ratings that contain actual gambling. Turns out the reassessment is actually part of a broader rethinking on the subject, with the PEGI board saying, quote, "At this moment, any teaching or glamorization of simulated gambling automatically leads to a PEGI 18 rating. On the basis of these appeals, the PEGI experts group will develop a more granular set of classification criteria to handle gambling themes and the simulation, teaching, and glamorization of gambling in different age categories, which will now include 12, but also keep 18 as an age category for games that simulate gambling typically played in casinos and betting halls," end quote. Huge congrats to Local Thunk on yet another big win, not only making a banger game that sells millions of copies, but one that is literally rewriting the very fabric of the ratings code. Love to see it. Some adaptation news now, and it looks like that Sifu movie adaptation is a go. It was a project announced a little while ago, but honestly that doesn't mean much these days, since most of the time it's about locking up the rights so no one else can get to it first. What makes this real though is that Netflix have just signed on, along with John Wick director Chad Stahelski, and yeah, there's literally no one better they could have picked for the job, since Sifu is basically the closest thing that we have to John Wick in video game form. More acquisition news now, and it appears as though the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund is about to buy Niantic, the studio responsible for the Walkabout mobile titles including Pokemon Go, Monster Hunter Now, and a bunch more. Bloomberg is reporting that Niantic are in talks to sell themselves to Scopely, an American-based mobile publisher that is wholly owned by Savvy Games Group, which is wholly owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. Bloomberg suggests that the deal could be worth around $3.5 billion and would be a huge shot in the arm to Scopely's portfolio, which already includes the likes of Monopoly Go, Star Trek Fleet Command, and Stumble Guys. Some sales data now, and Tekken 8 has now sold through 3 million copies, achieving that milestone in just over a year, which is a little bit faster than Tekken 7 managed. That entry went on to sell 12 million units though, so still a long way before Tekken 8 catches up. NetEase is very keen to put on a brave face after all this recent turmoil, so they just announced that Marvel Rivals has surpassed 40 million players. How many Concords is that, I ask you? We'll need Microsoft's new quantum computer to run those calculations for us. Here's one that makes me very happy. Pacific Drive has now sold through 1 million units, and to be honest, that's still too few because it's just a fucking great video game and it deserves to sell a boatload more. Please go out and buy it right now if you haven't. It was my number 3 game of the year last year, and Yahtzee Crosshaw's number 1, so I'm not the only one who thinks it rules. 1 million is impressive, but it's nothing on Palworld's numbers. 32 million players and counting. Nintendo's lawyers absolutely champing at the bit, but still having no luck whatsoever in their filings against Pocket Pair. Fucked up indie darling Mouthwashing was a bit of a late bloomer, arriving with little fanfare in September of last year before picking up steam in December and beyond. It's now sold through 500,000 copies ahead of a planned PlayStation and Switch release very soon. Will it be a Switch 2 launch title? I think Nintendo are unlikely to include that one in their marketing. And the absolute best sales news you're going to hear all week, all month, or probably all year, Alan Wake 2 has finally turned a profit. There really is justice in the world after all, even though it is criminal that a game this good took this long to break even. Obviously, it's massively hamstrung by being an Epic exclusive, where a Steam release would have seen Remedy hit this milestone long ago. But hey, a win's a win, and I'm just glad that Remedy are finally going to start getting paid for making one of the best games of this generation. Actually, on that note of the Epic Game Store, Epic released a year in review roundup for how the store is tracking, and it's actually growing. It's now 295 million users, up 25 million from last year. Spending exceeded $1 billion, up 15% from last year. 595 million free games were claimed, and if you got all of them, you saved yourself $2,229 US. And the most played games include Genshin, Rocket League, Honkai Star Rail, GTA 5, and Fortnite, cementing what I and many others have long said: making games like Alan Wake 2 exclusive to this storefront is a massive waste, because the kind of nerds who are interested in Alan Wake and Metro Exodus are not Epic's target market. Just focus on the casual core stuff and the gacha stuff and put everything else on Steam. To finish off, we've got some layoffs news this week because, of course, we do. Striking Distance Studios, who earlier put out the ill-fated Callisto Protocol, they just laid off an undisclosed number of staff. They actually recently put out a little isometric roguelite called Redacted, which doesn't seem to have made much of a splash, and apparently the team are now working on an action game being built in Unreal Engine 5. Bossa Games put out Surgeon Simulator a little while ago, and they too are laying off an undisclosed number of staff after laying off 40 people as recently as January of this year. Night School Studios made the Oxenfree games before being acquired by Netflix in 2021, and they've suffered an undisclosed number of layoffs that they say won't affect their current slate of projects. And a serious bummer, this last one, Crytek is laying off 15% of their workforce, or about 60 people, while also stopping work on the development of Crysis 4. Crytek said they needed to allocate their resources to where they're needed, which is why they made the decision back in Q3 of last year to swing their full weight behind Hunt Showdown updates, which is great because Hunt rules, and it's awesome to know that it's still performing well for Crytek. But on the other hand, a new Crysis game would have been kind of cool, and now that's not happening. Guess we'll need to continue relying on 3D Mark and Cyberpunk to do our GPU benchmarking. Sad times. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, boy oh boy, strap yourselves in, because we've got not one but two indie showcases to get through, both of which had a ton of incredible looking games with release dates to boot. So consider this a sort of primer for the kind of indies you can look forward to in the next 6+ months. Let's start with the Annapurna Interactive Showcase. Yes, that label is still pushing on despite their entire team quitting last year. Like I said, they are funded by a billionaire and they had a bunch of projects already signed, so they chose to press on rather than fold up shop, and the momentum seems fairly unbroken since in this showcase they announced that the developers of the award-winning puzzle game Cocoon would be partnering with Annapurna for their next game as well. In terms of other highlights, they showed off Wonderstop. This is that cozy-looking tea shop management simulator that has some intriguing, very dark undertones. You're a former adventurer who is trying to get accustomed to a new life, but there's clearly still some shit you have to deal with. This one comes from Davey Rendon, the creator of the Stanley Parable, along with Carla Zamonja, one of the creators behind Gone Home and C418, best known as one of the former composers for Minecraft. 11th of March for this one, and it's coming to all platforms bar Switch. There's also a demo on Steam as part of Next Fest right now. Next is Lush Foil Photography Sim. This one's been kicking around for a while now in various forms before being picked up by Annapurna. It comes from a solo Australian developer, and it basically presents a bunch of incredibly detailed real-world locations, gives you a camera to tinker with, and sets you out on low-stakes photography missions. April 15th for this one, again for all platforms bar Switch, and again there is a demo for this one. Here's one Ed is particularly excited about, Skin Deep from Blendo Games. Blendo, aka Brendan Chung, is a former AAA game developer who's been making really fascinating games on his own since 2010. Stuff like 30 Flights of Loving and Hacker Simulator Quadrilateral Cowboy. He's been quiet since 2018 though, working on this, a comedic first-person immersive sim where you play as an insurance agent tasked with saving spaceships from space pirates any way you can. PC only, out on the 30th of April, and again, there's also a demo. Just as wild of a game is 2AT, which is the next game from Keita Takahashi, the guy who created Katamari Damacy after thinking, what if you had a sticky ball and could just slowly roll up every single thing on the planet? Well, his latest thought is, what if you were stuck in a T-pose for your entire life, like a fucking Bethesda NPC? That's exactly what this game is about, playing a teenager trying to get through everyday life while stuck in this position. This one's coming to all platforms bar Switch on May 28th, no demo for this one sadly. Finally, Wheel World is this chill cycling game from Mesoff where you ride a ghost bike around and race other cyclists. These developers created the fantastic sword fighting game Nidhogg, and game feel and vibes are a big deal with this one too. This one's got a release date for Northern Summer 2025, so sometime in the middle of the year, and it'll come to all platforms bar Switch. There's a demo for this one, so check it out. Okay, ID at Xbox time, and word of warning that there's a lot of stuff here. We'll skim through just the highlights, but do check out the entire show if you're interested in more. Tempopo is the next game from Aussie Studios Witchbeam, which previously made two completely different bangers, Unpacking and Assault Android Cactus. This one's completely different again. It's a rhythmic puzzle strategy game, kind of like Lemmings if you're old enough to remember what that was. It's coming out on April 14th for all platforms bar PlayStation, and it's heading to Game Pass, and there's a demo out right now on Steam. Tron Catalyst is a top-down action game based on the classic Disney franchise, and developed by indie icon Mike Bithell, who did John Wick Hex, The Banished Vault, and a ton of other great games. This one's being published by Devolver's new Big Fan label, and it's got a release date of June 17 for all platforms, a few months before the next Tron film. Revenge of the Savage Planet is the sequel to Journey of the Savage Planet, where you explore colorful alien planets and catalog all the weird shit you find there. It's got a release date of May 8th, and it'll be out on all platforms bar Switch. Blueprints is this roguelite-ish narrative puzzle mystery game from Raw Fury we featured on the show before. This one's finally got a release date of 10th of April this year for all platforms bar Switch, and it's coming to Game Pass, so definitely keep an eye on that one. Herdling is the next game from Okomotive, which made a game called Far Lone Cells back in the day. This one is about herding a bunch of beasts out of a destroyed city and into nature. Looks really lovely, and it's got a mid-year release window for, you guessed it, all platforms bar Switch. A few general 2025 release dates were given for Hotel Barcelona, which is a new 2D action game from Suda51 and Swery, coming to all platforms bar Switch, as well as Ratatan, the spiritual successor to the PSP rhythm action game Patapon, and was coming to all platforms. Also worth mentioning, Lies of P Overture also got a new trailer during the showcase, which is really pushing the definition of indie, but sure, why not? A couple of new games were announced during the showcase. One is Rock Beast from Team 17. It's a story-driven management RPG that follows a heavy metal rock band made up of anthropomorphic animals in the 1990s. Weirdly, this one was written by Jakub Samalek, who was a senior writer for The Witcher 3, principal writer for Cyberpunk 2077, and is also working on Blood of the Dawnwalker. We actually just interviewed this guy on the Friends Per Second podcast last week, a really fascinating chat about his time at CD Projekt Red, the new project he's working on, and his overall thoughts on the state of writing in the games industry. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link to it below the like button. And finally, The Lonesome Guild is a new single-player party-based isometric action RPG published by Don't Nod, who just put out Lost Records Bloom and Rage. As you might expect from something published by this team, character bonds are important in this one, with stronger relationships bringing more stories and stronger abilities. This one is slated for a fall 2025 release for all platforms bar Switch. Alright, showcase is done, but there was a ton of other stuff that got announced this week too. Des Pilote is the next game to be published by Playdate makers Panic, a really nice looking first-person adventure game about being a soccer-obsessed kid in Ecuador. This one's got a release date for May 1st for all platforms, and it's already been nominated for a whopping 4 awards at the upcoming Independent Game Festival Awards at GDC, including a Game of the Year prize. Keep an eye on this one, there's also a demo live right now during Steam Next Fest. Next up, Strange Scaffold, the indie studio that did I Am Your Beast and El Paso Elsewhere, and puts out like 5 games a year. They just announced their next one, Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3. This is apparently a comedic survival horror Metroidvania where combat and actions are resolved with match 3 puzzles. That's also supposed to be a bit of a meta commentary on the sorry state of game development. No, there isn't a Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 or 2 you can play, at least not that we're aware of. This one's coming sometime in 2025 for PC, and there is also a demo. There's also a Steam Next Fest demo for Strange Scaffold's other game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tactical Takedown, a turn-based tactics game based on the 90s Ninja Turtles cartoons. Man, does this team ever sleep or what? Devolver Digital also announced a few extra things this past week. The Talos Principle Reawakened will get a release date of April 10th for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. This is the Unreal Engine 5 overhaul of the first-person puzzle game that comes with a new chapter. They also announced a new game from the developers of My Friend Pedro. It's called Shotgun Cop Man, and you play a little sausage dude who propels himself through levels with guns on a quest to arrest Satan. Okay. PC and Switch for that one, sometime in 2025, demo out right now. And Monster Train 2 is the sequel to the popular deck building game from a few years back that wasn't Slay the Spire. That's got a demo too, and it's coming to all platforms, but no release date yet. Bloody hell, there's still more! Among Us 3D is basically taking Among Us VR and putting it on a flat screen with cross-play functionality. PC only, demo out now. Dune Awakening, Funcom's next survival MMO thingy for PC, got a release date of May 20th, and there's a character creator up right now you can play around with. Here's a weird one. The creator of XCOM, Julian Gallop, announced his new game, and it's not what you'd expect. It's a colorful action strategy hybrid game, kind of like Pikmin or Brutal Legend, and it's called Chip and Claws versus the Brainioids. Very different vibe for this one, clearly aiming for a younger strategy audience. It's coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox sometime in the future, and there's also a demo out right now. And finally, they are bringing back Samurai Pizza Cats. Hell yeah, my friends, that is right. The cult 1990s kids anime that a bunch of elder millennials right now are going nuts over. Now, I've never heard of the developers or publishers of this game, but they are bringing back the original voice cast from the Japanese and English versions of the show. They are making new animation scenes using old school pen and paper techniques, and it looks like they're going for a SNES style action adventure game, so it could be alright, I guess? A 2026 release date for this one moment, headed to, quote, all major platforms, end quote. Interesting. Alright, one delay and one cancellation for you now. Tales of the Shire, the cozy Lord of the Rings Hobbit life simulator, that's been delayed once again to July 29, 2025. The previews for this one a while back weren't particularly promising, but it's clearly a title that's gone through a tumultuous time with its publisher Private Division getting sold off and its portfolio changing hands. This latest delay has reportedly been made in large part due to renewed scrutiny, especially on account of performance on Switch. And the big cancellation for this week, other than the Wonder Woman game of course, was the free-to-play monster hunting game Dauntless. That will completely shut down on May 29th, and the previously planned and delayed content update scrapped. This team has had quite a ride over the past year after being acquired by a blockchain firm, something that was kept a secret for a long time, and then suffering a series of layoffs over the past year that resulted in the majority of the team being cut, and announcing the incredibly unpopular changes to Dauntless's weapons and progression systems. A very sad end to what used to be a very promising alternative to Monster Hunter, and it just really sucks that this news came out like 2 days before Monster Hunter Wilds released, because this team worked their asses off for many years to try and make a competitor to Monster Hunter. So for management to throw in the towel this week of all weeks, that's a real big bummer. Anyway, wishing the team all the best and hoping they're able to find new gigs very soon. So what came out last week? Well, Star of Providence is that bullet hell shooter roguelike that got picked up by Big Mode and released a big new update last week in addition to a Switch release. It was already overwhelmingly positive on Steam, but it's got about 300 new reviews since this update was pushed out, and it's still sitting very comfortably in that overwhelmingly positive territory. Here's a Steam review from a new player who goes by the handle Uh-Oh, and they said, quote, "Quick, snappy, all-killer, no-filler action shooter with thoughtfully designed enemies, bosses, and minigames. A game whose difficulty respects your time, and win or lose, it's a full experience each time through," end quote. Donkey and Leah clearly picking another winner there, congrats. Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is the bonkers new spin-off for the Yakuza series, which is coming at a strong 80 on OpenCritic. Lots of reviews pointing out its recycled setting and side activities, but also its entertaining pirate battles. GameSpot gave this one 7 out of 10, saying, quote, "Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is a solid spin-off, putting fan favorite Goro Majima front and center with a suitably eccentric diversion into buccaneering piracy. The story doesn't pick up until its excellent final chapter, and it's disappointing that the narrative doesn't delve into Majima's complex personality, but this is still a thoroughly entertaining adventure on the high seas," end quote. Yakuza superfan Ed also wrote up a review for this one, which you can see right now over on our Patreon page. Not behind a paywall, free to read to absolutely everyone. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. He seemed to have fun with it, but was disappointed by how little it offered diehards. Quote, "It's hard not to feel like it's selling the series a little short. Like a Dragon's other spin-off games were some that provided some of the most hard-hitting character moments of the whole series, vastly different settings, and endearing new characters. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii offers moreish entertainment, plenty of laughs, and a surprising number of dance numbers, but despite the flashy pomp, it's the least substantial the series has felt in some time," end quote. Alright, on to this week's releases. Oh boy guys, this week's a big one for sure. It's finally here. The hunt you have all been waiting for. The legendary monster himself is hitting the greens again. That's right baby, Tiger Woods is back in video game form. PGA Tour 2K25, get ready to play that golf game. All you golf people in the audience must be very excited for this one. The most golf I have ever watched was in Happy Gilmore, and I suspect the only golf I will ever watch between now and when I die will be Happy Gilmore 2. Anyway, this one's out on February 28th for PC, PS5, and Xbox. That, of course, is the same day that Monster Hunter Wilds comes out, Capcom's latest in the series that helped turn them from a potential Microsoft acquisition into a standalone global giant. Reviews are already out for this one, and it scooped the crown from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 as the highest rated game of 2025 in terms of aggregate scores. A lot of the diehard critics have lamented that it streamlined the game a little bit too much, but there's still a lot here to process and chew on if you're new. We'll do a deep dive into those reviews next week when a few more of them have released. Also coming out on the 28th is 2 Point Museum, so long as you're game enough to buy into the early access period. This is the latest management strategy game from the folks who brought us the excellent 2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus. This one takes place in a museum, naturally, where you have to go out and collect artifacts on top of managing the institution to display them. The regular launch for this one is next week on the 4th of March. A couple of other good things dropping on the 4th of March. Carmen Sandiego is the reboot of the classic edutainment series, this one based on the Netflix adaptation, which I'm told is actually pretty good. This one comes out on all platforms, and it's actually already been available for about a month on iOS and Android through Netflix subscriptions. It adds a bit of simple action and exploration on top of the deduction and globe-trotting gameplay of the originals, and best of all, you can go to Brisbane, Australia, the one city that Australians would ordinarily put near the bottom of their holiday list. Why can you visit Brisbane in this game? Because the game was made there, of course. There'd be literally no other reason to include Brisbane, trust me on that. And finally on March 4th, turn-based tactical brawler Knights in Tight Spaces arrives for PC, which we talked about a bunch of times in the show already, including it being a radar pick from a little while back. Great looking title, be sure to check that out if you get the chance. Alright, we talked a lot about new indie games this episode, but we really love the look of one that came out just last week, so put this on your radar. This is Bachelair, a local multiplayer game that's like a competitive dungeon crawling speedrun. Basically, you have 2 minutes to rush into a dungeon, grab as much loot and kill as many monsters as you can, and rush out before the place collapses. Then you spend your loot to grow stronger in order to better tackle the next run, but the ultimate goal is to be the one with the most loot at the end, so there's a big risk-reward factor. Looks like a lot of fun, and you can play it solo too. This one actually comes from the Sock Pop Collective, who are a self-described video game boy band from the Netherlands. Okay guys, these four guys release a new game on Steam every month, and they have a shockingly good hit rate with some really neat and sometimes complex ideas, some of which have even broken out, become massive commercial successes, and picked up awards. Definitely check them out on YouTube or their Patreon if your interest is piqued, or if you're a CEO spending hundreds of millions of dollars on AAA games, because man, it's a good reminder that it's possible to make very cool games without a ton of money. If you want to check out Bachelair on Steam, I'll leave a link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Games Store, you can still pick up the cozy life simulator Garden Story and the not so cozy survival game World War Z Aftermath. Once Friday hits, you'll be able to pick up Mages of Mistral, an isometric action game where you play as a battle mage and craft your own spells to sling. This one came out in 2017 and has a very positive rating on Steam, and there's a sequel to this one in the works, so that'll be one to keep an eye on if you happen to enjoy this one. If you have an Android device or an iOS device in Europe, you can also claim some free games on the Epic Games mobile store. Up for grabs at the moment are the mobile versions of Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, two banger RPGs that are available until March 20th, 3 new additions to Xbox Game Pass in the tail end of February, EA Sports F124 for all you casual nerds, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader for all you proper nerds, and Watch Dogs Legion for anyone who wants to imagine a dystopian future where AI and cryptocurrency dominate modern life. Never happened, of course, don't worry about it. And finally, you can pick up the last few Prime Gaming offerings for February this week, which include gold codes for the excellent Deus Ex Human Revolution, as well as the very good Kingdom Management game, Yes, Your Grace. If you don't have enough shoot-em-ups in your life, you can also pick up one of the genre's all-time greats, Sin Mora, on the Amazon Games app. Our feel-good story for the week is one I've wanted to come back to for quite some time now, because something this good can only stay in the drafts for so long. Esports ain't what it used to be. With declining viewership and reduced investment, the scene is significantly smaller than it was a mere 5 years ago when Bobby Kotick was selling Overwatch League spots for $20 million a piece. Luckily, there is one bastion of the esports scene that has only grown in popularity in recent years, and that's the Excel World Championships. Yes, I'm not making this up. Every single year, a bunch of data science nerds descend on Las Vegas to compete in a live arena-style event where teams try to crunch and format data faster than the other team. The event is sponsored by Siemens, and honestly, it feels like Microsoft really did these guys dirty by not kicking in some cash. The event does have shoutcasters who provide both play-by-play and color commentary. Best of all, they have their own theme song, and I would remind you that this is 100% real. You're gonna love this.
It's the Excel World Championship. Who is going to win? It's the Excel World Championship. Who's going in the spreadsheet bin?
Alright, ladies and gents, with the stirring sounds of the Excel Championship anthem in our ears, it's time to bring this bad boy home. Thank you so much for watching. You're always a great audience. If you happen to have enjoyed yourself, we'd love it if you could drop the video a like either here on YouTube or over on Spotify, since yes, you can get this video over on Spotify and watch it there as well, not just listen. If you want to come back next week and do it all over again, then be sure to hit that subscribe button or that follow button on Spotify. Like I said, we've got the KCD2 review coming this weekend, as well as an episode of the Friends Per Second podcast. After that, March is here, so look forward to Split Fiction, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and plenty more surprises. Thanks again for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Incogni. So I'll admit, I didn't really know much about the world of personal data until I was approached by this video's sponsor, Incogni. I knew that big corporations like Apple and Google had my data, but what I didn't know was that hundreds of other companies that I'd never even heard of also have my data, because it had been on-sold by various data brokers. These companies can sell your data to basically whoever they want, including spammers, or worse, malicious actors looking to use your personal data to commit identity theft. Now, the loophole here is that you can actually technically contact these companies and ask them to delete your data, but not only do you not know who has your data, but there are so many of these data brokers that it would be impossible for you to contact them all. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni Incogni does all the work for you, sending out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your data. Take me for example. Incogni has cleared my data from over 66 places that I didn't even know had my data, and had I done all of that back and forth myself, that would have taken me around like 50 hours, which is time that none of us have. I've absolutely noticed a significant reduction in the amount of spam emails and texts that I've been getting, and it just feels nice to know that my data is more secure, since no one wants their personal information being held by some company that you didn't even know existed. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.